Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into some really surprising truths from Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money. It's a book with a pretty radical idea, that getting good with money has way less to do with how smart you are and almost everything to do with how you act.
So let's just jump right in with a story that really gets to the core of this whole thing. On one hand, you've got this guy, Ronald Reed. He was a janitor, and he quietly built up an $8 million fortune. Then, on the other hand, you have Richard Fuscone. We're talking Harvard MBA, top finance executive, and he went bankrupt. So the question is, how on earth does that happen?
Well, the answer isn't what you'd think. It's not about IQ or having some fancy degree. Housel's main point, the one he hammers home, is that financial success isn't a hard science at all. It's a soft skill. It has so much more to do with your psychology, your patience, your greed, how you see the world, than anything you could ever learn from a spreadsheet. Okay, so to really get a handle on our own behavior with money, we first have to admit something. We all have this kind of unique financial blueprint, right? And it's been shaped by all these forces that, honestly, we probably don't even think about most of the time. And Housel points out something that's, it's pretty wild when you think about it. Your own personal experience with money, it makes up maybe, 0.000000001% of everything that's ever happened with money in the world. A tiny, tiny fraction. But that tiny fraction, it makes up something like 80% of how you think the entire financial world works. We're basically all just anchored to our own little slice of history.
All right, let's make this real. So say you were born in 1970. That means when you were in your teens and 20s, your most impressionable years, you watched the stock market just go on an absolute rocket ship ride. Of course, that's going to hardwire you to be super optimistic about investing, right? It just makes sense.
But now let's rewind just 10 years. What if you were born in 1960? Your coming-of-age story is totally different. You'd have lived through crazy runaway inflation. You watched prices literally triple. That experience teaches you a completely different lesson, a much more cautious one, about what a dollar is actually worth and the danger of just letting cash sit there.
And this all leads to a really important takeaway. Nobody is crazy when it comes to their money decisions. A choice that looks completely nuts to you might make perfect sense to somebody else, all because of their own unique, emotionally charged experiences. The bottom line is, we're all just a product of our own story.
Okay, so it's not just about our personal history. There are these two other huge forces out there that are always at play. Two forces we often kind of ignore because, they're a little uncomfortable to think about. And those are luck and its identical twin, risk. Think about the Bill Gates story. We all know he's a genius, we know about the hard work. But his whole journey was kicked into gear by a ridiculous 1 in a million stroke of pure luck. Back in 1968, he just happened to go to one of the only high schools in the world that had a computer. What are the odds?
But here's the other side of that coin. For every incredible story of luck, there's an equally powerful story of risk. Gates's best friend, a guy named Kent Evans, was by all accounts just as brilliant, just as driven. He could have been the co-founder of Microsoft. But he got hit with a 1 in a million dose of pure, tragic risk. He died in a mountaineering accident before he could even graduate.
And that right there is Housel's point. Perfectly illustrated. Luck and risk, they're just two sides of the exact same coin. It's a powerful reminder that our success or failure is never, ever 100% due to our own efforts. For every Bill Gates, there's a Kent Evans out there, someone whose story was tragically cut short by forces completely out of their hands.
So if you really understand the power of risk, it leads you to one of the most important and maybe one of the hardest lessons in the entire book. And that is simply knowing when you have enough. It sounds easy, right? But it's a skill that some of the most successful people on the planet just completely fail to grasp.
Just look at Rajat Gupta, former CEO of McKinsey, had a net worth of $100 million. He had everything you could possibly want, but he wanted to be a billionaire. So he threw it all away on insider trading and ended up in prison. Or think about Bernie Madoff. He was already running a massively successful, totally legal business, but it wasn't enough. He felt this pull to get even richer, so he built that infamous Ponzi scheme.
There's this fantastic story about the authors Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller that just captures this idea so perfectly. The real, ultimate form of wealth, it isn't about getting a bigger number in your bank account. It's about having the wisdom to know where your own personal finish line is, to just know when you have enough. So when you boil it all down, the single hardest but most important financial skill is just getting the goalposts to stop moving. It's about resisting that poison of constantly comparing yourself to others, that endless hunger for more, which is so dangerous because it makes you risk things you have and need for things you don't.
Okay, so if constantly chasing more is a trap, then what's the real secret to building wealth? Well, it's not about taking these massive risks trying to get massive returns. It's about using a force that, honestly, our brains aren't really built to understand intuitively. And that's the incredible power of compounding.
And for this, there's no better case study than Warren Buffett. Just try to wrap your head around this number for a second, because it's genuinely absurd. A staggering 96% of his entire fortune was earned after his 65th birthday, after he could have started collecting Social Security. See, his genius wasn't just being a great investor. It was being a great investor consistently for a really, really long time.
You can see it right here. His net worth climbs pretty steadily for decades, right? But then look what happens in the later years. It just goes vertical. It's like the first few decades were spent building the launch pad, and the last few were when the rocket finally took off. His real secret weapon wasn't just skill, it was time. And the lesson here is so simple, but it's really profound. Good investing isn't about hitting home runs and getting these massive, explosive returns. It's about getting pretty good returns that you can stick with for the longest possible time. It's about consistency over intensity, every time. And this brings us full circle, right back to where we started, back to that paradox. Ronald Reed, the janitor, he got this. He understood it intuitively. He used the one major advantage he had, time. He was just patient. But Richard Fuscone, the fancy executive, he was greedy. And in the end, that one simple difference in their behavior, it completely wiped out the massive gap in their education and experience.
So, at the end of the day, the psychology of money isn't really a how-to book for investing. It's a book about what's going on inside your own head when you're making money decisions. And it leaves all of us with a really big question to think about. In your own financial future, what's really in the driver's seat? Your intelligence or your behavior?